All right, guys. Our next book that we're going to read as a whole sixth grade is Number the Stars by Lois Lowry. It is a Newbery Award winner, and it takes place in Denmark during World War II. So it's kind of important that you have a little bit of background information about World War II and Denmark during that time. So let's talk about when World War II was. World War I ended on November 11th in 1918. Hitler became the German leader in January of 1933. He ran as a member of the Nazi Party, which is a political party or was a political party at that time in Germany. In 1939 is when World War II officially started. That's when Germany invaded Poland, which most people recognize as the start of World War II. Norway was invaded in 1940, and then in April of 1940, and then June of 1940, France falls to the Germans. This is pretty important because France is a pretty big and central country in Europe. And up until this time, the U.S. wasn't involved except for to help supply the Allied forces, but they didn't have troops fighting. But then, on December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor, which was a naval base in what we now know as Hawaii, was bombed by Japan. Japan was an ally of Germany during this time, and was upset with the U.S. because the U.S. stopped doing trade with Japan because of its alliance with Germany. So the next day, our President Roosevelt, declared war on Japan, and that's how we entered into World War II, how the United States did. Other important dates, June 6, 1944 is D-Day, which is the beginning of the Battle of Normandy. That was kind of where a lot of people think the tide of the war changed from the Axis powers to the Allied powers, being kind of winning and being in stronger in charge. May 8th, 1945 was VE or Victory in Europe is declared, but Japan did not surrender. So the United States, Henry Truman was president at the time, decided to drop 2 atomic bombs. Well, they dropped the first one on August 6th of 1945 in Japan, and Japan still didn't surrender, so they dropped another on August 9th in 1945. By August 15th, Japan decided to surrender, and that was considered the official end of the war. Where was World War II? Well, obviously it was all over World War, since it was a world war, but the 2 theaters were the European and North African theater. So this is Europe right here. See, there's France, which is obviously a really important central country. Germany is right here in the green. Our story takes place in little old Denmark, which is attached to Germany up here. And then Norway, I mentioned earlier. Great Britain was one of our allies. One of the countries that was in the Axis powers, though, that was fighting against us was Italy. So it was Germany, Italy, and Japan, where it was the United States, Great Britain, or the UK, and the Soviet Union were the Allied powers. Northern, which means, the upper part of Africa, was also involved in the war some, especially with Italy. The other part of the other theater, I guess, is, sorry about that, is the Pacific theater. And we know a lot about, the European part, but the Pacific part is really a lot of where the United States was involved. Here's Japan right here, this little sliver, because it's an island country. And then down here are like the Philippines and things like that. And that's where the United States was doing a lot of its fighting, because think, oops. Remember that, Hawaii's right over here. So, because it's not a flat map like we usually see, it's a globe, it's round. So the Axis powers, the people we were fighting against were Germany, who started the war by attacking Poland. They felt humiliated after their defeat in World War I and decided that they needed to gain more land. They claimed that they did not have enough resources to take care of their own population, and so they needed to expand their country. Japan claimed to be attempting to unite East Asia, and they brought China into the war. They attacked Pearl Harbor after the U.S. refused to continue trading with them during the war. And Italy joined Germany in an effort to gain more land as well, for the same kind of reasons that they said that Germany said they needed more land. Some believe that Italy was kind of the start of World War II because they invaded Ethiopia, which is a northern African nation, in 1935-36. But most people reflect more and say it's more Germany invading Poland that started it. But either way, not good things. We were among the Allied powers, which was in January of 1942, became the United Nations, which the U.S. is still a part of. So the U.S. is one. Neutral until the bombing of Pearl Harbor, was a close ally with the UK, fought in both the European and Pacific theaters. The Soviet Union was actually originally a partner with Germany, and then Germany invaded them in 1941. So that is a great way to make somebody not happy with you. And the United Kingdom depended on the U.S. for supplies prior to the U.S. entry, experienced lots of air raids. If you go back to our map, remember, this is the UK right here. They're also an island, just similar to like how Japan is an island nation. The American home front is not an important part of Number the Stars, but just to give you some ideas. So my grandparents would have been alive and part of the American home front, but my parents wouldn't have. So they experienced government rationing of things like gasoline, meat, and clothing. You had to use a ration book to purchase things. So they gave you stamps that you used, and you had to have that and the money, obviously, to purchase things. There were higher taxes paid to support the war. The workforce changed because when the U.S. entered the war, that took lots of able-bodied men that were part of the workforce to fight. And so retirees, teens, and women stepped into those roles that the men had to leave behind, the jobs they had to leave behind. There were lots of volunteer efforts, and kids were involved. Schools and people planted victory gardens so that there was a surplus of food or extra food to be sent overseas. There were scrap drives where people would save metal, paper, rubber, and rags. They recycled that, and then they used it to create things like munitions and, ships and planes and things for the war. A part of our time during World War II that is not a great part of our history were the internment camps. This was when Americans of Asian descent, many of them being born in America, but their family maybe had originated from Asia or in an Asian country, were forced to live in camps. So they were taken and told they had to go live in these camps, with the excuse being that they may spy because they are loyal to Japan, or they may give away, or sabotage from the inside of the United States. If you want to read more about that, a very good graphic novel called They Called Us Enemy is by George Takei, or Takei, I think actually is how you pronounce it. But it's a very good graphic novel, and it explains his family, and he was a little boy, and they lived in the internment camps. Another part that you have to talk about when you talk about World War II is the Holocaust. The Nazi Party took control of Germany in 1933. Many Nazis blamed Jewish citizens for not doing more to help them win in World War I, and they really blamed them for Germany's defeat in World War I. During World War II, the Nazis created concentration camps where many Jews were sent. Some camps were death camps, where people were killed with poisonous gas when they arrived. Others were work camps where people lived in horrible conditions, crowded, bed bugs, fleas. They weren't well fed. They weren't taken care of, and they were often worked to death. Families were separated at camps. The Nazis also put people who helped Jews hide or escape, Roma, or commonly known as gypsies, homosexual people, Jehovah's Witnesses, and those who were mentally or physically disabled into camps. 6 million Jews were killed, along with 5 million non-Jews, for a total of 11 million people that died because of the Holocaust. The yellow star here is something that the Germans made Jewish people wear to identify as Jews. And then this is a swastika. It's important that you can visualize that because it comes up in the book. The Number the Stars story that we're going to read takes place in Denmark. It's a very tiny country that's actually connected to Germany. The story that we are reading takes place on the islands here. The first place is Copenhagen, and then they go to Gilleleje, which is right up here. Denmark's role during World War II. Denmark declared itself to be neutral during World War II, but on April 9th, 1940, the Germans decided to occupy Denmark along with the capital city of Copenhagen. On August 29th, 1943, Germany placed Denmark under direct military occupation. The Danish Resistance movement developed during the war, and most Danish Jews were actually able to escape with helps from the resistance movement and their neighbors. And that happened around 1943 when the Nazis ordered Danish Jews to be placed in concentration camps. King Christian X was the king of Denmark throughout the war and refused to leave Copenhagen, even though many other royals in other countries left and went to seek exile or safety in other countries. King Christian, who is pictured here on his horse, was considered a symbol of the Danish bravery. And this is the Danish flag. There are a number of important characters. The two that are most important are at the top. Anne-Marie Johansen is Christian. She's a best friend to Ellen, and she's 10 years old. She's kind of, she's an athletic person, and she's a dreamer. Ellen Rosen is very different. She's Jewish. She's best friend of Anne-Marie. She's also 10 years old, and she's much more studious and serious. Kirsty Johansen, Anne-Marie's 5-year-old sister, is very sassy and very chatty. Lise Johansen is Anne-Marie's older sister, who passed away a few years before the novel takes place, and she was engaged to a boy named Peter Nielsen. Inge, or Mama, Mrs. Johansen, is Anne-Marie's mother and a brother to Henrik, a strong, determined, and calm and caring person. Papa Johansen is Anne-Marie's father, who is very patriotic. He prides himself in being a Dane, or a Danish person, and willing to talk to his children about tough topics. Ellen's parents are just Mrs. Rosen and Mr. Rosen. Ellen's mother and best friend of Mrs. Johansen is Mrs. Rosen, and Mr. Rosen is Ellen's father and a teacher. They all live in the same apartment building. Peter Nielsen is a once familiar person to the Johansens because he was engaged to Lise Johansen. He is very busy and only comes around occasionally. And Henrik is Mrs. Johansen's brother. He is a fisherman in the town of Gilleleje. So at one point in the novel, they leave Copenhagen, and they go from Copenhagen, where the star is, to Gilleleje, and they take a train there. And he lives in him and Mrs. Johansen's childhood home. So hopefully this gives you a good background of what Number the Stars is like and what was happening in the world during that time. And we will start reading it soon, and you will get to hear their story. Thanks.